Thank you for tuning in to InRange. This is going to be another update on the What Would Stoner Do project.
Yes.
We're going to have a series of these in which are really not shooting videos. They're discussion videos about the selection process, about the components we use to build these guns.
Right, because we've got a couple more components that we've done some testing and some evaluation and tried out a couple different pieces and come to some conclusions on the one that we actually like best.
And we've said all along that we wanted to put them through some trials first before we came to you with a video saying this is the one we've decided to standardize on.
Right.
As you said, the InRange stamp of hubris.
Yes, the official stamp of hubris.
This is the stamp of hubris today for the upper receiver.
Yes.
So we were looking around at upper receivers and trying to find the lowest weight option that made the most sense for our applications.
Right.
And we came to two.
Yeah, so originally the other criteria is we wanted uppers that didn't have forward assists.
Now that's going to be contentious, and we'll get into that later in the video.
However, with that as the criteria, we came up with VLTOR and Aero precision. And so what we initially did was we built your rifle with an Aero upper, and we built my rifle, which you can see right there, with a VLTOR upper.
Mm-hmm. And the logic behind that was that your rifle had the longer barrel, was going to be the more accurate of the two, or the more longer range one of the two.
Right.
And the VLTOR upper is slightly more rigid, being kind of a milled receiver.
Yeah.
And in general, generally speaking, the AR-15's accuracy is not derived from the rigidity of its upper receiver.
Right.
It's derived from the barrel, because the locking points and the chamber and everything is one part of the barrel integral.
Yep.
And really the upper receiver is nothing more than to hold everything in line for the bolt carrier bolt and everything to line up with the barrel chamber.
Right. However, we have to put it on one of the two, and so if there's any theoretical improvement, we'll put it on the long-range gun.
And so we started doing some shooting with it, and we came to find...
Not really ideal. Now, there wasn't anything that it actually did wrong. Mm-hmm. However, it was a little bit heavier than an Aero. I mean, it was kind of this angular, cool-looking... In fact, it is.
We have it right here.
Yeah,
in fact.
Kind of angular, kind of cool-looking, but a little bit heavier. And then what they did was actually a modular assembly right here in place of the forward assist and the ejection buffer.
The brass deflector. In fact, there's a screw that holds this part in. So when they make this up, they mill this upper receiver, they leave this area open, and then they put on whichever component they want for that particular unit.
Right. So you could put on a forward assist there if you wanted one.
Mm-hmm.
The problem we came up with was when we actually went and started looking at ambidextrous control options. The ambidextrous bolt release we have on these, which we haven't touched on yet.
That's a separate video.
But this kind of interfered with it, more so than a standard Aero type upper.
So essentially, while there was absolutely nothing wrong with this product, and I would consider it a high quality, high value product.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were not saying do not use a VLTOR upper for your build if you want to. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. But for our purposes, looking for lower weight.
Yep.
And having some of the strange ambi controls that are not normal to a standard AR build, this upper did not lend itself towards our goals.
Right.
Now, some people are going to ask, why did we not look at polymer uppers?
Because they suck?
Well, I don't know if that's true, but I mean, so historically speaking, there's been some carbon fiber attempts and stuff like that.
Well, it goes all the way back to the Carbon 15.
It does. Mm-hmm. And there's now a brand new one actually being made in Tucson, of all places, right here in our neighborhood that I haven't had no contact with yet.
Right. We tried looking up parts from them, and they don't do parts. They only sell complete rifles.
Guns, and they're really brand new to the market. American Rifleman did a little thing on them recently, and they're doing a polymer upper. But the reality is that in this regard, being that the upper receiver portion of this is also our optics mounting platform, this is an area that we didn't really want to mess with too much. There is a need to have rigidity here.
Yes.
And we don't want to play the G36 polymer G floating zero problem game.
Yeah.
Now, we're not saying that the newer polymer upper receivers have that problem. We don't know. And we haven't been able to acquire or test one in a way to find out.
Right.
But the Aero Precision upper receiver is actually very low cost.
Yep.
It is essentially a standard receiver that you would see as any other just part, except they have the option, if you want to get it, to exclude the forward assist.
Right.
They also make it with a forward assist as well. So the InRange stamp of hubris is now kerchunked onto the Aero Precision upper receiver for its weight reduction qualities.
And you know what? They're actually, as you said, they're very reasonably priced. They're actually kind of cheap uppers. They're not expensive. They're certainly less expensive than the VLTOR. And so we decided to swap mine out for another Aero. So I went and bought another Aero receiver because that's what I wanted to have on the finished product. So we will now be giving away.
Yeah, we will be giving away the VLTOR as one of our Patreon supporter giveaways. So that's it. There's really not a lot to say here. The upper receiver is not a complex component in part of your AR-15 selection process. Most upper receivers are like any other upper receiver. There was no idiosyncrasies with there were idiosyncrasies with the VLTOR in terms of how they milled it, but there were no idiosyncrasies in terms of function problems.
Right.
And there were absolutely no idiosyncrasies with the Aero precision upper in that everything just worked.
Yeah.
Which is what you can say. There was no problem mounting components on it. There was no problem using it. There was no functionality issues. There was no malfunctions as a result of it. It just plain worked.
Yep. That's kind of what you'd expect.
So that's that. We'll go ahead and stamp that as approved, but let's get into this conversation because we know it's coming.
Yeah, so no forward assist.
Yep. So the reason or the rationale behind this is a couple fold. One, and this is personal experience. I've been shooting ARs a long time, maybe not as long as someone in the audience, but maybe longer than some of the people in the audience, in a variety of venues, high power, training events, run and gun, 2-gun, 3-gun, you name it. And I can say this is just my experience, maybe not yours. I have never personally seen the forward assist remediate a malfunction on the gun ever. Ever. I have seen, however, many people, when something goes awry, to do something, and this could be training, I get it, but the button's there, gun no worky, hit button. And I have seen a number of situations in which hit button made things worse.
Right.
So if a round was bent or screwed up, or someone tried to chamber around earlier and it's kind of warped, or there's filth or something that's causing it, not necessarily to cycle sluggishly, but not go into battery.
Right.
It's been my experience, you're better off clearing whatever that round is out of the system and chambering a fresh round.
Right.
Smash just made this thing get wedge.
Yeah.
And not always. I'm sure there's someone out there in the audience that is smash and fixed a problem. Probably. Considering
I'm sure someone has.
AR-15s are prolific and we've shot gazillions of rounds through them, and that was added there, and there are reasons and rationale that came as a result of that. But in my experience, every situation I've ever seen, I've never seen it been used for anything but to make things worse.
And it's also worth pointing out that Stoner himself was against the addition.
He was.
He did it only on the express request or demand of the Army. The Air Force never did.
They never wanted it.
Yeah.
They landed up getting it as a result. The Army strong-armed him. And he was actually Stoner's design for the forward assist when he was forced to design one. Turned out not to be this button initially. It was a ratcheting system built into the charging system, in which you could pull it back and it would ratchet, and then you could force the charging handle forward. That makes more sense to me, and
Potentially.
I can see where Stoner was going with that, but this was easier and more expedient, so they ended up going with the button. There are a couple other things that we became aware of while trying to investigate the forward assist. And actually some of our collaboration with PNS brought this out. I have never seen this, but it came up in one of our talks with them, or at least it did in one I was in. They have actually seen a situation in which someone was firing around a barrier and had the forward assist wedged against the wall. So they brought it around and then brought the gun back, and the forward assist was depressed forward.
Without them realizing it.
And fired the gun.
That's a bad thing.
Turns out that's catastrophic because the bolt tries to cycle, and then those teeth are then going against the forward assist. This whole part shatters, it breaks major components, and the gun's down. And I'd never heard of that, but when that came up on the PNS discussion, I was like, that's a fascinating failure point.
That really could kind of happen.
The other thing that I have seen or experienced, and this may or may not correlate to people's experiences in the audience, is that now as a right-hander, irrelevant, as a left-hander, especially in suppressed rolls, which, by the way, we have other discussions about suppressed rolls on ARs, which is a separate video. This is a gas leakage point. Not always, but somewhat.
Potentially.
It's also a problem if there is a catastrophic event in that you now have an opening here and some metal parts that are held in with a pin and a spring that can blow out in that event.
Right. So these are all very unlikely situations, but if you're not really getting any real benefit from having the button there in the first place, why even have the possibility of these other things happening?
So obviously you can build your build however you see fit. The What Would Stoner Do project is an attempt to build what we think is the right answer. If you think you need this, well, then choose an upper that has it.
And you're not really losing a whole lot by doing it.
No,
it's not like you add a lot of weight to the gun doing it. It's not like you're going to harm any of the ambi functions that we'll be getting to.
Correct. We're explaining to you the rationale about why we chose not to.
Now, there is one other thing people are going to say. They're going to say, what if I want to close the bolt quietly and slowly with a round in the chamber? And my answer to that would be, there is actually a little cutout on the bolt itself.
There's a couple answers
see
to
that. Right.
Hold on. So
right there.
Now this happens to be a lightweight carrier, not the one we're certifying. It's just what's in here right now. You can, when it's not hot, push on this.
Yep.
That's there. However, there's a couple other things I'd like to say about that. I don't know how often that's a need.
Approximately never, except when you're discussing it online.
This feels like the EMP discussion, right? Because EMP,
Yes.
because I need to quietly chamber around. Okay, the other one that comes up is a press check. So you bring the bolt back, you look at what's in there, and a properly maintained AR-15, when you let this go, would go right back into battery.
Yes.
If it's not going into battery, there's other problems with your gun or ammunition or things that you should be looking into.
Yep.
And I realize that in the military, a lot of stuff has not been maintained properly, and therefore
That's putting it mild, right?
that's a problem. But that's not a problem with the design we're trying to apply here.
Right.
If negligence is going to be your standard modus operandi, the AR-15 is not a good gun to go with in the first place.
Get an AK.
AR-15s require some level of maintenance.
Right.
Not necessarily cleaning maintenance, but cyclical maintenance. Like, has this spring been in there since 1969? You might have a problem. And if that was your experience in the military, the problem isn't the design. And this forward assist fixing that problem is masking a bigger issue.
Right. A much bigger issue, a much more important issue.
So in that said, and I learned this actually from a Marine at Camp Perry, believe it or not, when they do the press check, or at least this guy did the press check, or these group of Marines did the press check, they had a really cool way to do this.
Do show us.
I liked it. So this is obviously not a standard charging handle, another video. However, you don't want to do this and just pull it back, because there's a chance you can go too far or whatever.
Right. You don't want to kick that round out.
But the reality is, if you wrap your hand around the stock like this and use your thumb to grab the charging handle, this will work on a standard charging handle, and you bring the charging handle back until it hits the knuckle of your hand, like that. See what I just did? You can see in there.
Yep.
You can actually feel like this. You can get enough distance when you wrap your hand around it, and this is not too far back that you shouldn't have the spring should still have enough pressure to go back into battery.
Right.
So you just grab around the rear, pull with your thumb, pull back until it strikes the side of your hand, visually identify, feel if you need to because of light, let it go. That's my preferred press check on an AR-15. There's probably 15,000 other ways to do it, and we'll hear about them in the comments. I'm showing you this one. It's the one that makes sense to me. I can feel, I can tactically identify and visually identify. It doesn't bring the gun too far out of battery, and it just goes right back into the chamber.
Right.
If that doesn't close and seal up, you have other problems.
Right.
Investigate later.
Perhaps a good thing for you to check and experiment with on your rifle at home before you go do anything else.
Exactly. And
If your gun doesn't go back into battery after a press check, then figure out what's going on with it.
if that don't work, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Straight up, something's wrong. And so, that said, that's the justification for this. We fully understand that some of you are going to disagree with it.
Sure.
Totally acceptable, but hopefully you understand the rationale behind it and why we chose it for our goals.
Yeah.
That's really all there is to say about the upper receiver.
Yeah, that's it.
So, guys, thanks for tuning into this. You now have another approved part for the What Would Stoner Do build if you're following along at home. If you like this kind of stuff, consider supporting us on Patreon. We are a wholly viewer-supported project. And if you can't do that, and giveaways like that are coming to our Patreon supporters. We do that every month. Every month, $1 gets you into that raffle.
Yep. It's not always something expensive, but it's always something cool.
And sometimes
it's usually a couple of cool things.
Sometimes it is something expensive.
Yeah.
Like we give away an RDB.
Yeah.
But even that, it's always something cool. It's never junk. It's never a bottle of Slip 2000. Not that Slip 2000 is a bad lubricant. Don't get me wrong, but those little free gibby, it's not that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you can't support us on Patreon, totally get it. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Full 30, and Facebook. And I know some of you hate Facebook, but the reality is it's where the conversation is, and we have a lot of conversations on Facebook that are above and beyond the videos themselves.
There's a ton of activity on the Facebook page.
Yep. So check that out if you can. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next What Would Stoner Do build project, video, thing, stuff.